I'm afraid if people treat us like an antique, then they can go to hell, because that ain't what it's about.
Hello there, my name is Gavin Walsh and today is Monday the 24th of August 2026. And I'd like to talk to you today about collecting the famous British punk band, the Sex Pistols. Pistols, of course, were probably the most well-known punk band in the world, and they certainly broke the punk movement into what subsequently became new wave in the 1980s music and everything else, but they spearheaded the breakthrough. And that has left them in a very unique position of collectability. They're right up there with Elvis Presley and the Beatles in terms of collectability, and in some instances they surpassed them. A phenomenal achievement when you could, and an achievement they never set out to have, but a phenomenal achievement when you consider that, Elvis Presley's career and the Beatles lasted a decade and well beyond that. The Pistols were around together for I believe, 805 contiguous days, or a little over 2 years, I believe, November the 6th, 75 to January 1478. They spawned a huge movement that came out from underneath them, and a lot of that movement to this day is quite collectible, but in terms of super duper collectibles, it is of course the Pistols that lead the way from that movement. I did a video last summer on a poster that sold for $77,400, I believe, and recently, because it's the 50th anniversary, I've been tinkering around with artificial intelligence and asking it a few little questions about the collectability of the band. And I started out by asking it, the first rule, I put a rule in place that you could only ask it about one item. In other words, you could, if you were into buying multiples, that's not going to count. So multiple or duplicates. So I put in, if you owned one of everything the Pistols ever released, what would your collection be worth now? Initially, I put in records, and it came back with a very, very surprising number, which I'll detail in a few minutes for you. And then I kept expanding it out, again, always relying on one singular item. And I asked it, if you had, say the God Save the Queen single, if you had that, the British pressing, the second pressing, and the third, and so forth, because some of these singles, as they sold more, they were repressed. And there were always little differences for record collectors to see in those pressings. And then if you had master copies, like what are known as acetates and test pressings. And then I went across overseas if you had the Italian pressing or the Australian pressing. And of course, some of those pressings, because Virgin were a very new company and there was no internet to send across artwork on, that when Virgin would contract out the record to, we'll say, RTC in New Zealand, they would comprise their own artwork. And because it was a small market, there'd be limited releases. So consequently, they became highly collectible. A classic case of is a single I went to New Zealand literally 5 times for, and I picked it up in the end for $3, but it was worth at that time about $5,000. But you've got to figure in 5 trips to New Zealand, which are round the world trips from Ireland. But all said, I continued on expanding this artificial intelligence. I continued expanding my question, and what if you had this, and what if you had that, strictly adhering to the one item rule only. And the figure started exponentially growing. Now, before I give you the figure, I would have, if someone said to me, if anyone had a super duper out of this world collection on the Pistols, what would its absolute tip-top value be? And do bear in mind, the artificial intelligence company does it in dollars. That's not to say you can't ask it probably for sterling or euros or convert it back yourself. But if someone were to come to me and say, look, given that you were a former collector and wrote the Sex Pistols Collector's Guide nearly a quarter century ago, or it was published nearly a quarter century ago, what top value would you put on them? I would have said, again, adhering to the one item rule, I would have said $6 to $8 million and really, really pushing it $10 million. Well, it comes back and it's actually a whole lot more. It's 15 to 25 million. Now that includes, by the way, that is a figure that is, it's real in the context. Whether you'll get it or not is another thing. If you had that collection, you were selling it. But it's real in the component sense of the word, that the AI went back and it went through auctions and it came up what items have sold for. Now, some of these items are, of course, stage clothing and Sex Pistols instruments, like maybe Steve's guitar and stuff like that. And of course, once you go into them, you're into the tens and indeed hundreds of thousands. In the artwork alone and the posters, as I've already explained to you, you could be into the tens. You're certainly into the high thousands. And in a lot of cases, low tens, and with the artwork, mid tens of thousands. So you can see the stuff adding up pretty quick. Okay, so the $64 million question that needs to be asked is, could it be done? Could a very substantial collection be built on small money? And the answer to that is, believe it or not, yes. Of course, time is the essence in here, of the essence here. If you start at a very young age, as a lot of people did, you could end up with a very substantial collection today, and it wouldn't have cost you the earth. You could do it out of a normal weekly wage. You just need to be just buying, not playing the stuff, hoarding it, and cataloguing it and putting it away very safe. Things like putting where the highly media items ink won't migrate, all that sort of stuff. I used to be into all that kind of stuff, and you got special non-migratory bags that you could put stuff into, and you were given a guarantee of nearly 200 years on stuff like that. Not that we'll be around for that, but the answer is it could have been done now. You would have to put in an awful lot of time at it, a huge amount of time. But the figure that I was going to come back and give you about the records, if you had every record of the Sex Pistols, and again we're talking one, so if you had a singular, so if you had every record they ever released, every pressing and every variant in every country in the world, and you had the promotional pressings, the test pressings, and the acetates, the figure that artificial intelligence is after spewing back to me is a mind-boggling 2.5 million. It's between 1.5 and 2.5 million. So you can see where the stuff is going. But none of this it's highly improbable, but none of it is impossible. And indeed, I know several collectors that are sitting on small fortunes, whether they'll sell them or not, because the other thing with the pistols is they were extraordinarily difficult. I'm a different kettle of fish altogether. I had to sell for bad luck reasons with money, and the market taking a huge crash in Ireland, the property market, and my own health came into the fore. So I didn't have a say in it, and that's such is life. But I'm delighted that my legacy will be the book God Save the Sex Pistols. It is the first collector's guide, and I think it's the only. I mean, there are books that have better items in them subsequently, and some pretty damn good books out there. But in terms of listings and quantifying and value and the stuff, I think mine is still the only one out there. I could be wrong, but God Save the Sex Pistols. God Save the Sex Pistols, and I believe the publisher has revised it and updated it, because as of January 1st, 2007, ISBN numbers were mandated to go from 10 to 13. And if I look up the latest, if I look up copies of my book in new bookshops like Waterstones or Barnes & Noble, the likes of those, it's coming in with the 13-digit code, and it even says revised and updated. So memo to my publisher, Sandra, we need to talk at your convenience. There was also the book was also published in Japan, which I'm also proud of. And speaking of the pistols, the Midas touch, the Japanese version, I've only ever seen one copy of it for sale, and it was on eBay, and it sold for, I believe, 150. So anything that touches is just insane. Concert tickets, concert stubs, not even the fancy ticket, the little stubs, used stubs. They're up on sale from anything from 4,000 to 10,000. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. Where's it all going to? Who knows? This is the 50th anniversary this year, and next year it'll be, to me, May and next year will be the true peak, because May is when they had their number one, which was denied to them. But God Save the Queen was number one, and to me that's when it'll peak. But will it fall after that? I don't think so. But I just cannot see it going stratospherically like it's been going for in recent years. But then again, all my predictions to date have been wrong. I've always underestimated what their stuff is worth, and but nature does tend to find a balance. And anyway, to all you collectors out there, the best of luck to you, and keep collecting, guys. And anyone that wants to get in on it, you're still going to find bargains out there. There's always bargains out there. You just got to be sharp and shrewd. Okay, cheers all. Up the pistols.